Yeah.
So common knowledge will hold it that in a year, we're going to have 4 seasons. But what if I told you this year in America, we're going to have 11 to 15 seasons? Now, I'm not referring to whatever you're binge watching on Netflix. I'm not referring to the weather. I'm not referring to sports. What I'm referring to is this year alone in America, we'll cycle through 11 to 15 fashion trends that will come, go, be stocked in stores, and then be right on their way out when the next one comes in. In a recent article for Pacific Standard written by Christina Moon, she said that the original process of fashion trends, which used to take 3 months for design, manufacture, production, and distribution globally, has shrunk down to 2 weeks, that they can do all of that and ship it out all over the world. Now, this idea or this trend of what is called fast fashion, and I'm just going to define that all for you now. It's defined as mass-produced clothing for little to no money, and it is sold very cheaply all over the world at high rates. It doesn't sound bad, and I'm going to agree with you, it sounds really smart, business-wise. However, this trend isn't all that glamorous. It actually is very detrimental. And that's why I would like to educate you on why fast fashion is unecologically sound, not ethical to make. But there's a lot of things you can do to combat it that have to do with recycling, upcycling, and other processes. Now, this idea of cheap clothing, you think it's a good idea. There's a lot of things I want to buy. I want to stay stylish. I want to be on trend. So I'll just pay less for it. Well, think about food. Fast food and processed foods are cheaper, and you can purchase a lot of them for less money. However, we all know that's detrimental to our health. So why wouldn't we think the same thing about what we put on our body? In the Encyclopedia of American Studies, it defines being on trend or wanting to stay up with the times is an idea that comes from we are insecure in who we are in our identities and what we have physically or where we are socially. So having the next latest, greatest car, or the next greatest phone, or the next greatest gadget is going to make you better and give you this identity that you need in society. And the means of which this is being communicated has changed over time. It used to be people you would see walking down the main streets. It used to be socialites you would see walking around town. And now it's being communicated through social media. Tons of accounts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. show up saying, you need this shirt, get this lip gloss, buy this makeup, this celebrity is endorsing this person just dropped this line, and you need it. You don't. But we think that we do. The problem is, though, that so many of these things that are being dropped are too expensive for most people to purchase, which leaves this large door open for third-party companies to come in and produce things at cheaper rates. For instance, the Yeezy 350 boots, an expensive sneaker ranging between somewhere $200 and $300. No one on the average consumer level is going to pay for this. However, companies in China found a way to make it for $20 to $50. The EPA, though, has said, the problem with this mindset is that Americans now think that they can purchase things for cheaper and just keep owning all these trends. It's giving us a bad mindset. We're wasting literally what we buy. Because when something rips and it's so cheap, we think we'll just replace it. I got this for 20 bucks, I got this for $5. I know where I can get it. There's plenty of them online. What if I told you our waste from 2011 to 2013 in respect of textiles went from 5 million tons to 6 million tons? And we can infer from that, by this year alone, we will have wasted 8 million tons or more in textiles and fabrics. The idea of fast fashion is rooted in history. In 1814, the power loom was created, allowing for more textiles to be made at higher rates. The Encyclopedia of Clothing and Fashion says that this opened up job opportunities to all kinds of people, no matter if they had any skills working with textiles or not. So, by the 1830s, over 59,000 women and 33,000 men were working in the textile industry. And at the turn of the century in 1900, during the census, there were over 300,000 men and 300,000 women all working in the textile industry. This high demand for clothing and textiles was becoming more and more relevant. We'll jump forward about 70 years, and America cannot supply enough of what it needs. So we start outsourcing for our labor and going to other developing countries like India, China, Bangladesh, Vietnam. Well, this presents a problem. The only way to turn out these kinds of demands for clothing is to have unhealthy, unlikable work conditions. And this has introduced the sweatshop. It is a large factory or warehouse where multiple people can be crammed in to work on textiles and other fabrics and sewing day after day after day after day, typically in unhealthy condition, being worked until either their fingers break or they drop dead at their sewing machine. Now, the problem is, in the 1990s, there was a large awareness raised about sweatshops, and many workers' rights came through to stop them. And sure enough, there were a lot of rights put on that protected people from sweatshop conditions. However, not everyone plays by the rules, or they can bypass it by submitting paperwork that says otherwise. So, how does this relate to where we're at now if this was in the 90s? Fast fashion is introducing, yet again, the sweatshop culture. It is not unlikely that you will find places even here in LA that are producing clothes in somewhat unlikable conditions. Robert J.S. Ross said for Dissent magazine that fast fashion is instituting the sweatshop culture again, and not only is it doing it again, it is becoming worse because there are more vindictive, angry people who need stuff faster. And you would think, why is this so bad? These people need jobs because their country's economies are falling apart anyways. They just need to work. And it's true, a lot of people do submit themselves to this work voluntarily because they can't get jobs elsewhere. But last week, reported by Sean Coulter in an article, he said that Syrian refugee children and Syrian refugees were being exploited by Zara for fashion labor and textile making. Work is work, but at what cost? Now, I don't want to leave anyone disheartened or in a rain pot. There are lots of things we can do to combat fast fashion. And one of the greatest things we can do is what we already know how to do. Recycling. We talk about it all the time with paper, we talk about it all the time with plastics, but what do we do with our clothes? We donate them. Yeah, that's great. Sometimes they end up in thrift stores, and sometimes they just end up getting thrown out anyways because they can't be used. But there are other programs that are being offered for textile recycling. H&M this last year has just introduced a program that allows you to bring in your clothes or any other clothes that were pieces of fabric and have them recycled into new fibers. This is great because it takes things out of the waste and puts them together to make new usable fibers. The idea behind this is that we need to upcycle what we're already using. And that comes in other forms too, besides recycling and taking things to thrift stores. For instance, YouTuber Annika Victoria. She's established a series called Make, Thrift, Buy. And what this series has to do is taking things that you wouldn't think could be reused again, or things that you didn't know how to style them. And she takes on-trend clothing and remakes them into other things. And she does this typically in response to clothing companies that usually try and do it. For instance, 2 weeks ago, she found a $68 upcycled skirt, and all she had to do was cut 2 slits in one she already owned and sew them together. It was that simple. So what we could be exchanging our money for is just spending a little more time and effort into our clothing in order to make things upcycled and brand new. Now, little to my knowledge, someone in my department is actually really good at upcycling, so I had a personal interview with them. His name's Andrew Watson. So I started talking to him about why would you upcycle your clothing, or what makes the appeal like so great about what you're doing. And he said, it gives me a sense of who I am, and it gives me this sense of style that no one else is going to have. And there's a lot of modern trends we already have today that you can copy by just simply ripping something apart or stitching it together. He said, Yeezy is nothing. I have a pair of scissors and some black thread. Watch me. And finally, there's an idea that was introduced by Laura Anneman and her colleagues in a recent fashion article. And it said that the reason we are so afraid of spending money on clothing that is considered a luxury or more expensive is we don't see it as an investment. We see it as a necessity that we somehow just have to feed, much like food, which is another reason why people buy fast food. You have to learn to enjoy and invest in these things. That's why your grandmother's fur coat has lasted so long. It was an investment to her. And she put her time and energy and the money that she needed for it into it, and it's lasted. And if we thought about clothes this way, they would last a lot longer as well. So overall, I'm really thankful that I do get to spend time educating you guys on what fast fashion is and the effects it's having on our Earth, ecologically, and the people that make it. I also want to encourage you to just be creative and stay inspired and look for new opportunities. And just create them out of things you never thought you would. Before I go, I do want to leave with a little bit of word imagery. One of my favorite Greek mythologies is about the three fates. Sisters that spin the threads of life, decide how long someone will live, and then one sister cuts it at the end to say who dies. In the same way, we hold the threads of life to our earth and to the people who make our clothing. And inadvertently, every day, we snip one, and another, and sew them into our wardrobes without ever thinking about how much it really costs to make that new jacket you want.